Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. We'll be getting started in just a bit. I'll have to see if I can get my act together. We do have the sounds, the sights and the sounds. So is Skype going to start up or not? That's our big mystery today. Is Skype has decided not to participate in whatever we're doing. All right, we're going to close out Skype. All the little things that normally would just be working fine. That's the one thing that has decided that it's not going to participate. Oh, wait, choose a theme. We're going to skip Skype. Skype, I think I don't need a tutorial. I don't need, looks like it's updated itself. We've redesigned Skype for you. No, you haven't, actually. If it was up to me, it would look exactly the way it did. All right. Well, thanks for all those bubbles and pop-ups and things like that. Because why would I worry about that? It looks like that's working. Let's see if it does. We're going to call in just to make sure. Oh, look, and it's pretty on the screen.
Thank you for calling.
All right. Well, that works. So at least that works. Even though it's been completely redesigned for me. It's been completely redesigned for someone, hasn't it? Welcome, everyone. We've got this is Network Plus study group today. Thanks for joining us. I've got things going over on Socrative. Oh, people are even answering the questions, as you can see over my shoulder. I was looking at my bird feeder that's in the backyard over my shoulder. Here it is. There it is. We've got no birds. Where's all the birds? There's no birds there. Put mealworms out there. They've got all kinds of sunflower seeds, and yet no birds. That's at birdfeeder.live in my backyard. Kind of nice out, though. What's the temperature? 79 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a warm day. Oh, good point. Where is the live chat? It's at it's called live event chat. Live Network Plus study group. Let's put this in the chat. There it is. And here's this thing. Did I not put it on the live page? Let's see if it's on the live page. If I go to /live, is it on the live page? Yeah, it's on the live page. It loads up just fine. Very nice. The other thing I haven't done is change the top of the website. The promotional bar that's at the top says my Live Network Plus study group is right now. Click here to join us. And it should point to /live and save the changes. Very nice. And just for fun, we'll also purge caches just to make sure nobody gets caught in the middle of a thing. That works. Hello, everyone. Hello, chat room. 39 degrees? Is that Fahrenheit? That seems a little cool. What else we got to do? I think we're kind of ready. I think we've got this is ready. That's going. This is going. Website's up. Skype is up. This is up. I think we're sort of set. We've got 6 minutes though, 6.5, before we get started. So you got a little bit of time. Make sure you follow along with the questions at professormesser.com/QA. Those are fun. We've got, we're recording. Are we recording here? We are recording down here. You can see the Cylons are going there. They have a plan. I'm recording here, and I'm recording online. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 video recordings going simultaneously, because the one here is actually getting both the live program feed and the preview feed. Same thing here. So I'm actually getting, there's the two screens in front of me are showing what you are seeing with this. There it is, what you're seeing here and what you're seeing here. So we didn't really do a camera check. We can do one of those. Hey, look at that. Look at that there. What's that all about? What's here? Oh, that all works. That works. So now today is Network Plus. We're doing Network Plus today. I think I've got pretty good questions for you. I'm trying to remember, actually. I wrote the questions last week. So now I'm trying to remember what did I buy questions right there? I don't remember. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. It'll be a surprise to all of us as we go along. How about that? I think I got everything else. How's temperature? Let's adjust some temperature in here. That might be a good idea. What's it set to? It's set to a little warm, as far as I can tell. Yes, the studio is quite warm. Let's set it down to something more reasonable with these lights on. You don't see the lights on this stream. They're really just above where that camera is pointing. I have them a little high because on me, you really can't see on me. You know, they're kind of right. I'm pointing at the lights there, so they're a little high. I think we got good coverage there. A question in the chat room. Have I heard of high failure rates in the Network Plus in 10.0.06? CompTIA does not disclose the passing rates, so we have no idea. I've not heard anyone specifically. There's always rumors. Oh, this test is harder than normal. This test is easier than normal. I hear the same both sides. So it's either easier or harder than normal. Isn't that the definition of average? I think it is. 50% of this exam is harder than average. I think 50% of this exam is easier than average. How are we doing on time? 2 minutes. 2 minutes, everyone. 2 minutes, everybody. Should probably get some graphics ready. Let's get Skype is ready to go, apparently. Wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready for all the changes. I'd like everything to be exactly the same. Nothing should change. It should be all exactly the same. But doesn't tend to be these days, does it? All right. All right. The Skype should, or the tweets should have gone out. I tried to make them 200 and something characters long, but that didn't happen. Oh, we could probably turn off the bird feeder of that. And no birds. Where'd they go? Where'd they go for that? I do not know. I have no idea. I think, though, we got Skype ready. We got this ready. What else? That's it. I mean, we got a stream, right? How bad can it be? We're good to go. It's in the can. We got a minute. We'll start in about a minute. Didn't realize that iPad HDMI out right there. Got a lightning HDMI out. That's nice. When did I get that? Don't even know what I have sitting around here on my desk. All right. With that, this type of mouse. This is a this is a monster-sized mouse by Hippus. This is a shoe mouse. My entire hand can sit on this mouse, and I move the entire. It's enormous. It's kind of hard to see from that angle. That's big. It's a big mouse. But it's designed so that I don't have to crunch my hand up to use a mouse. And it's awesome. It's awful for gaming. It's the worst gaming mouse ever. but for video editing and everything else, works fantastic. Okay, stop for, let's do the thing. Here we go. Let's start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2017 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group, coming to you live from the Messer Studios headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm your host, James Messer, for this next hour of Q&A that has everything to do with the Network Plus certification exam. That's where we're going to focus our efforts today. I've put together plenty of questions for us to go through in this first hour. And then after the first hour is done, I will transition us off to the after show. And we'll have some questions from the chat room. I'll open up the phone lines. You're welcome to call in. We can do all of those things once we get going. I'll answer whatever questions you have. It doesn't have to be about Network Plus. It could be about anything, really. If you are watching this live, you can even participate live with our QA. I'll tell you in just a moment how to do that. If you're not watching live, if you're watching this on a replay, then you can at least follow along. There's some fun to be had there. Of course, you can track what's going on here by following us on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter. I'm putting out a bunch of new Security Plus videos on YouTube right now, so you may want to consider subscribing to YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. And don't forget about the discount on the vouchers. Don't pay full price when you're ready to take your CompTIA exams. You can get it 10% off by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. That gives you something to work on. I'm able to do these live study groups thanks to your support. Of course, every single minute of every single one of my Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus videos are available for you to watch online absolutely free. But some people like to have one that they can take along with them, something offline. And that includes both my 1080p HD videos. It includes all of the MP3 audio of all of those videos. It includes my course notes PDF. Those are all available in this package. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. We've got a lot of things to go through today. But before we get started, we're going to do live Q&A. But when we're done here, you can always do my online Q&A at professormesser.com/popquiz. I have taken some of the questions from these study groups and I've archived them at professormesser.com/popquiz. So they're in these large 20-section chunks. So you can sit down and really go through a nice smattering of questions from many different areas of the exam. So something you might want to consider, and they're free to use online. There's 100 or so questions there. So that might be something to go through later on. I also make a podcast version of this study group. If you don't want to watch the live video replay on my website, you can always have it just show up in whatever podcasting catching program you have. You can find out more about that and learn how to subscribe with your podcasting RSS reader at professormesser.com/podcasts. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be asking you questions today live. And so you'll be able to answer live interactively along with everyone else who's watching this live by going to professormesser.com/QA. Now, you can also manually open up a browser window and go to Socrative.com. That's the name of the service this will take you to. The room name is Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER, which is also the room name you will need if you download the Socrative student app for your mobile device. But that's what we're going to be going through today. The easy link is professormesser.com/QA. And that will take you directly to the Socrative front end. You'll be able to see questions already there waiting for you, in fact. I'll have more on that question in just a moment. We'll go through those details. We are going to talk about Network Plus today. It's all about the N10006 exam. Now, this exam was released on February the 28th, 2015. There are rumors on the internet. There's been no official announcement, but there are rumors on the internet that a new version of the Network Plus exam will be updated, released, the N10007 in March. So right now, as we're sitting here, it's November the 8th. So in about 4 months, there should be a new exam. Now, what CompTIA normally will do is they will overlap for about 6 months or so. So I fully expect that the current Network Plus exam is going to be around till September timeframe of 2018. So if you're planning to take your Network Plus, you're studying for Network Plus right now, do not stop studying. Do not wait to take a newer version of the exam. Not only is it not a good idea to wait, there's no upside to waiting. In fact, if you take the N10007 or you take the N10006 and pass them, you get exactly the same certification. So there's no benefit for taking just a new set of questions. And in fact, there will be fewer number of those questions available. There will be less study materials available because it will be brand new. I will, of course, have an updated course at that time. But until then, we've got the N10006. And since it's around for so long, that's the one you should work on. Let's do some questions. So if you go to professormesser.com/QA, you go to Socrative.com and click the student login and go to the room name Professor Messer, you will see a question here. When was the modern espresso machine invented? And what I will see on my side is this. I get to see exactly what you're answering. None of us seems to know exactly when it was invented. This is obviously not a Network Plus question. This is one for us just to try some of the questions and answers on Socrative, just so we get used to the user interface. You're able to get into the room okay. You're able to see the question, when was the modern espresso machine invented? If you don't see this question, then you're not in the right room. You've done something wrong. Go to professormesser.com/QA or make sure you spell the room name right, PROFESSORMESSER. The possible options are 1925, 1945, 1965, 1985, and 2005. The modern espresso machine. The winner right now, 1945, 32% of you have said that. Just behind it, 26% have said 1925. And then kind of a tie for third, really, with 1965 and 1985. In single digits, only 7% have said 2005. Nobody seems to think that it was that soon that we have a modern espresso machine. So let's see what the answers really are. And by the way, no answering in the chat room. We're going to have that sort of as a standing rule for the study group. You should always go to Socrative and answer on there. No hints in the chat room either. This will be just like we're taking the exam, right? No hints from anybody, no Googling. Let's see what the answer really is. Here it is. This is Achille Gaggia, who invented this modern espresso machine, this Italian, in 1945. He invented this. So that was, thank you, Achille. I like that you created this. This keeps me going. This keeps all of the videos coming. So you should also be very pleased that this was created this way. I get to create more videos faster thanks to this. Now, the reason I mentioned this is that today, November the 8th, as we sit here, National Cappuccino Day. Thank goodness there's a National Cappuccino Day. How would we be able to do any of this without it? So hopefully you got that one right. The answer, 1945. How many of us answered? 33% of us. A third of us said, yeah, 1945, which means a third of us Googled it. You can't fool me. You don't know when the modern espresso machine, or we guessed. It was a guess at what we were doing. Well, let's do some Network Plus Q&A. I think we've got the hang of this now, don't we? We've got the idea of how we should make this work. Now, by the way, when you're ready to take your exam, you sit down and you push the start button on the exam. The first questions that will be posed to you will be a handful of questions that are not multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. They're questions that could be fill in the blank. They could be a sorting question. It might put you at a command prompt. It might ask you to do anything but answer a multiple choice question. And they might give you a number of these. Now, some people's strategy is to skip over those, go through all of the multiple choice questions, and then circle back to those. Because I think the multiple choice might help you remember things that might help assist with those performance-based questions. That's a pretty good strategy. Some people like to get them out of the way first thing. So it really depends on how comfortable you are with the performance-based questions. Well, with that in mind, I like to do a performance-based question first thing on the study group. So I have a performance-based question for you. So let's go to this next question. The performance-based question is right here. This is a fill in the blank. Identify these Ethernet cable wire maps. So I'm not giving you multiple choice options. And again, don't put any hints in the chat room. We have to figure this out ourselves. I'm expecting you to know the name of these. So you should be able to just give me, this is a fill in the blank. You just have a blank option in Socrative. So just put in all four of those names in order. If it's A, B, C, D, you can think of it that way. But just give me all four of those. The performance-based question, since you're asking in the chat room while you're answering this one, how are these performance-based questions graded? CompTIA has been not exactly forthcoming, but then again, they're not really forthcoming with any of the grading mechanisms. There are, what they have said is that there is a subset of questions that are provided as performance-based where they do offer partial credit, but they do not offer partial credit on all of them. And you don't know which ones they do offer partial credit on. So that's one of the challenges you have, is you really don't know how they're graded. This is kind of the challenge of any certification exam in the industry, is you never are really privy to any of that information. They don't provide any of those details. It is effectively an industry secret, really a company secret, not even an industry. CompTIA internal proprietary secret on how they grade their exams, and they really have no plans on disclosing anything about how these exams are graded. So we've got a number of you that are answering these Ethernet cable wire maps. I'm sorry those of you listening on the podcast can't see these wire maps, but stand by. We'll be getting to a multiple choice in just a moment, and we'll talk about what these are. But I've got 4 wire maps on the screen. This would be something you should really go back and look at the video replay so you can see the differences, and maybe you can figure out, what are these different wire maps here? What do they represent? What are they associated with? What could they be? Well, let's answer them. I think we've got enough people have answered. A lot of you are Googling these. A lot of you are looking through videos right now. So we're going to answer them on the screen. This comes from, by the way, the N1006 exam objective 1.5. My video name for this is straight through crossover and rollover cables, which should give you a hint as to at least some names you could put here. But it's too late because we're really going through the answer right now. Let's look at the first one. What do you think the first one could possibly be? It looks like 1 through 8 looks normal on one side, but then it's all switched over. Pin 3 goes to pin 1, pin 4 goes to pin 7, pin 5 goes to 8, 6 goes to 2, 7 to 4, and 8 to 4. Or 7 to 4 and 8 to 5. That would be unusual for them both to go there. That is a crossover cable. That's commonly seen. It's for Ethernet crossover cable, and it's wired with the same colors as a 568B wiring. But the pinouts there are absolutely associated with an Ethernet crossover cable. So if you were to put 2 cables next to each other and look at them, and you look at those colors, you should be able to discern the differences. You should be able to see, oh, that's a crossover. I can see that the orange is going to here, the green is going to there. You can get an idea from those. That helps a little bit. Let's look at the next one. The next one is pin 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, all the way down to pin 8 to 8, which means that that must be a standard Ethernet straight through cable. We also consider these to be patch cables. This would be when we're connecting a workstation to a switch, we use a straight through cable. We connect this, that particular kind of configuration relatively straightforward for the straight through, because pin 1s, pin 2, pin 3, pin 4, they all connect to the same pin on the other side. Again, you should be able to put up the ends of an Ethernet cable and see that they are wired exactly the same, and you would be able to tell immediately, oh, that's a Ethernet straight through cable, something I can use for patch cable. Now, this third one's kind of weird because pin 1 actually comes back and connects to pin 3 on the same side. In fact, it doesn't connect to anything on the other side. Pin 2 connects to pin 6 on the same side. Pin 4 connects to pin 7 on the same side, and pin 5 connects to pin 8 on the same side. Well, it's almost like they're looping back over themselves. And in fact, that's what that is. It's a loopback plug for this specifically Ethernet and serial. Now, not all loopback plugs look exactly and work exactly the same. The pinouts are going to be specific to what you're using. That's a very common pinout to be able to do that. You can almost follow from the crossover cable, and the loopback is very similar, except it's looping back onto itself. Pin 1 to pin 3, pin 2 to pin 6. You can see it in that loopback cable, that it follows that same form, except it's looping back onto itself. And the third one, kind of an odd one. Everything's reversed. Pin 1 goes to pin 8, pin 2 to 7, 3 to 6, 5 to 4 to 5, 5 to 4, et cetera, et cetera. It's exactly flipped over on itself, which means that that must be a rollover, we call it, rollover cable. You may see some folks call it a Yoast cable, but this is a serial type of cable We're connecting up from a serial port, and we're usually connecting up to a device that has been specifically designed to use this rollover cable for serial connectivity. You commonly see this on Cisco devices. You would be connecting your laptop to the Cisco device to configure it, be a switch or a router, one of those types of devices. And you need, instead of a serial crossover or a serial null modem, effectively, we need this rollover cable to be able to do this. So those 4 are coming directly from the exam. So these are things you would need to know. So pretty important to be able to have those there. And it's important also that you're able to recognize them. So you may be presented just with a picture, and you have to know what that picture does. So hopefully that will be something that will be useful for you as you're planning your strategy for an exam. And most of you did pretty good with that one. I can see that most of you have gotten those pretty well. Since this is fill in the blank, I'm kind of flipping through them and looking at them. I think we did good with that one. Well, let's jump into multiple choice. I have some multiple choice questions that come directly from the exam. Hopefully you guys did pretty well with that one. If there's questions on that, again, you can look at the bottom of the screen on any of the answers, and you can see both the exam objective and the name of the video that is associated with the particular answer, so you can go back and read it and watch more about that. Let's do another question. This question is about single sign-on. Which of the following can authenticate and provide SSO? This is, see, I'm already giving you some hints. Already telling you what SSO is. Maybe you know all about SSO. And if you do, then you'll know the possible answers here should jump right out at you. Which of the following can authenticate and provide SSO? Is it A, Kerberos, B, NTFS, C, LDAP, D, CHAP, E, PAP? There's 5 different options to choose from. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to answer these. Which of the following can authenticate and provide SSO? It's one whenever I start looking at all the different options. People have even said this recently on some of the online forums, is that there's a lot of abbreviations and topics. It is an exam that just makes your head spin with the number of abbreviations and acronyms. And that's true. In networking, we love our acronyms. As someone who has been a systems engineer and designing these networks and putting together next generation firewall configurations and designing these very large implementations, it's just you look at one of these maps and it's just swimming with abbreviations and lines and content. We're dealing with load balancing and all of those protocols. We're dealing with routing and all of those protocols. We're dealing with switch redundancy and all of those protocols in a single design. How does any of this work? How does any of this manage to actually operate? And yet it does. Yet we somehow are able to engineer them and put them together. So let's see how we did with this one, authenticating and providing SSO. How do we do? Well, 49% of us said A, Kerberos. And number 2, a strong number 2, 31% said LDAP, 12% said CHAP, and then kind of a tie for 4th with 5% that said PAP and 3% that said NTFS. So SSO is a pretty important thing to run into. SSO is single sign-on. This is, I mentioned earlier when I was talking about this question and what it was, is single sign-on. Single sign-on, of course, is when you can authenticate one time and then magically the system knows that you indeed were already authenticated, and you don't have to keep putting in a username and password and a username and password and a username and password. You put it in one time, a single sign-on, and now the system recognizes you and then provides you the proper access to multiple resources based on that original username and password authentication. So it's kind of a nice thing to have. Otherwise, we'd have to sign on to gain access to the network. Then we'd have to give our username and password to gain access to the printer. Then we'd have to do another username and password to gain access to another shared drive somewhere. But wait, there's another shared drive. So let me put my username and password in again. Let's not do that. And that's why Windows works exactly like this. It uses a protocol called Kerberos. Kerberos is this one-time authentication, single sign-on methodology that can allow you to save a lot of time by simply adding your username and password one time and you're in. This is something that is pretty nice to have this capability. It uses some extensive encryption and cryptographics to be able to hash, sign, and keep track of the time of day so that things can't be replayed. Kerberos is exceptionally safe to use. It is exceptionally powerful. It is obviously what everybody uses in Windows. In fact, this is probably the most secure method of single sign-on that people will use. There are other methods to do single sign-on the internet, probably really just as secure to have that. There's no real good way to spoof this because built into Kerberos is not only the ability to protect the information. I went a little too far. You're already starting to see the other questions. Not only can you see when you're logging in that it's taking your username and password and protecting it, but there's built-in, during the authentication process, built-in capabilities for encrypting the data and protecting it. So you have this not only encryption, but also able to maintain and watch for replays using a lot of timestamps. That's why if you ever have a machine that's set to the wrong time and you try to authenticate into a Windows network and you're using the right username and password, it doesn't work. Suddenly you're not able to do it's not working properly, and you look at the timestamp on your machine and it's not correct. Kerberos is very sensitive to the time and being able to do that. So make sure you're aware of that too and being able to work with those. This is one where if we're looking at the answers, I think most of us got that. I try to shoot for 50% of you finding the answers to these, and indeed 49% of you did choose Kerberos, and that would be A. You did get that one absolutely right. Now, why wouldn't it be LDAP? LDAP is a fantastic type of authentication. It's used very often to authenticate people logging in through their VPN, to authenticate people that are logging into switches and routers. And in fact, the Microsoft Windows Active Directory domain controllers, those devices can support LDAP authentication as well. But LDAP authentication doesn't have any single sign-on capabilities built into it inherently. It simply provides authentication. It simply allows you to provide a username and password and gain access. If you still needed to access another switch or router and you're using LDAP for authentication, you would have to give your username and password again. LDAP isn't going to be able to have a single sign-on function for those. We also, by the way, all of these are from the exam objectives. So you have to know all of these different answers that are in here. CHAP and PAP are also single type of authentications that don't provide single sign-on. It's a username and password check, a single authentication check, and that's it. So that's one of those that does come in handy. You don't see much PAP, certainly not a lot of CHAP, but they are used for very particular use cases. So you will still see them roaming around out there and how they operate. And NTFS is not an authentication type at all. NTFS is a file system type. So that's not really used for authentication. It's used for storing data on your storage devices. So that's one that you shouldn't be answering. And indeed, 4% of you, the lowest number, said, yeah, that's not authentication. It's not even close to SSO, which means if you answered A, Kerberos, 49% of you got that one absolutely right. Well, let's jump to the next question, which you've already seen a little bit, but you haven't seen the answers. The question, which of the following would be the best step to minimize broadcast storms? Which of the following would be the best step to minimize broadcast storms? Would it be to A, enable STP? Would it be to B, enable full duplex networking? Would it be C, perform a packet capture? Would it be D, replace hubs with switches? Or would it be E, configure static routes? One of these would be the best first step to minimize broadcast storms. This is one, by the way, that you definitely see on the exam. These are topics that come up. And notice these topics, these questions that come up are not about answering or deciding what an acronym means. You will probably not get a lot of questions like that on the exam. CompTIA is not really interested in knowing if you can spit back out the name of an acronym. What they're really interested in knowing is, can you apply these to be able to do something? And that's what this question asks. It says, which of the following would be the best first step to minimize broadcast storms? And it's going to be the best step based on these 5 options. So whenever you look at a question on the exam, it's its own self-contained world. You may say to yourself, I can think of a much better first step to minimize broadcast storms. I would do this. Well, they didn't ask you about that. They asked you about these 5 things. So you have to choose between these 5 things, which would not only be the best step, but be the best first step to minimize broadcast storms? You get a lot of questions like that on the exam about what the best thing to do might be. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and maybe you can answer this one and get these here. This is a bit of a challenge too. It's a very common thing to see on our networks because IPv4 networks extensively use broadcasts, and sometimes they use a lot of broadcasts. And when there's a lot of broadcasts, we call that a broadcast storm. That can affect the overall performance of the network because a broadcast is sent to all devices on the network. So how are we going to resolve that? I've said too much. I've said way too much. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm going to have a look at the answers, and we can see that we've got really a top 2 here. 43% of you said to replace hubs with switches. 34% said to enable STP. We've got 11% that said perform a packet capture, and then now we're down to single digits. 7% said to configure static routes, and 5% said to enable full duplex networking. So which would it be then? If we were trying to get rid of all these broadcast storms, how would we be resolving this issue? Where broadcasts, of course, are used extensively. We were just talking about this. They're used a lot to be able to have these, especially because there's so many different types of protocols, especially with IPv4, that are not really well designed. They have to communicate to everybody all at once for them to work properly. That's where we get these from. These broadcast storms are really focused and limited to a single broadcast domain, we call this. It's one of those things that you do run into. So if it's a single VLAN, that's a single broadcast domain. Usually, once you hit a router, broadcasts don't hop through a router. They do not pass through a router. So as soon as a broadcast hits a router interface, that's where it stops. So if you can put routers all around a different group of people, it'll have broadcasts in that broadcast domain, but they're not going to go outside once they hit that router and have those there. And obviously, if you have a lot of them, they're going to take up bandwidth. They're going to take up cycles from your machine doing these types of things. Every device has to process every single broadcast coming through. That's why in IPv6, no broadcasts. And that's a big reason why, because broadcasts are a problem in being able to do this. So how would you take the first step to minimizing the number of broadcasts? Well, first thing you need to do is figure out where they're coming from. Where are all of these broadcasts originating? And what is causing them on the network? The only way you would know would be able to capture a broadcast storm and understand exactly why that's happening. You can then look to see who's originating the broadcast, what's the information inside of the broadcast. You can provide more details about who's sending the broadcasts and all the other pieces. And maybe you would even at that point want to separate the network up into smaller broadcast domains instead of maybe put more routers in place to be able to do that. So I think that's one where whenever you start looking at how can I make this a little less broadcasty, the first place to start is why is it broadcasting? What is something that will be an issue? So let's look at our possible options here and what folks showed. So let's have a look. We can see that 44% said replace hubs with switches. Interestingly enough, a hub and a switch, if you replaced all your hubs with switches, it would be exactly the same broadcast domain. Remember, I said the broadcast domain stops at a router. Hubs and switches don't route. So you can take out all of your hubs and put in switches, and you'll still have exactly the same number of broadcasts. That's not going to help you at all. 33% of you said to enable STP, Spanning Tree Protocol. Spanning Tree Protocol is a protocol that switches use to communicate with each other to avoid having any loops on the network. Well, loops have nothing to do with broadcasts. In fact, most networks you're on already have spanning tree enabled. So those spanning tree that's there, it's not stopping the number of broadcasts. It's not minimizing it. If you disabled spanning tree, assuming there were no loops in your network, you'd have the same number of broadcasts. So that doesn't help us at all. If we enable full duplex networking, whether we're communicating a full duplex or half duplex has no impact on the number of broadcasts coming through the network. And configuring static routes could possibly have an impact on broadcasts if you are indeed using a dynamic routing protocol that uses broadcasts to communicate. which is relatively unusual. And it would probably not be the first thing you do. Somebody says, we have broadcast storms. You wouldn't stop everything and say, all right, everybody, we're going to statically route. That's definitely not the first step. You don't even know if that's what's causing the problem. So the actual answer here is the 11% of you that said perform a packet capture. That is the correct answer. That's the first troubleshooting step for resolving this broadcast storm problem. If you answered C, perform a packet capture, you got that one absolutely right. Well done. This A plus, or the Network Plus exam is just huge. It's a big exam. It has, as I mentioned, tons of topics, tons of acronyms. People have said they thought they knew about the idea of networking because they were working on their A+. Then they jumped into Network Plus and realized, oh no, this is a big world. This is an enormous world. So what are we going to do here to learn all of these topics about protocols and cabling and fiber and encryption and wireless and proxies and topologies and on and on and on? Well, you can, of course, watch all my videos. They're available to watch every minute of every video. You can see everything that's there. And I really highly recommend that you take your own notes. It's something nice to have, but you may not have time to go through the hundreds of videos that are here to be able to take your own notes. But it's okay. I've already got notes that I made for you. In fact, I went through every single one of my Network Plus videos, and I literally wrote down everything that was on every slide. And I literally took every picture from every video and I put them into this document. Now, some of you that have been watching these course notes for a while said, yeah, the Network Plus course notes, those are 15-page course notes, right? Oh, no. I went back and wrote down everything. These are 70-something pages. What's the final page count on these courses? 65 pages? What are they? 65 pages long. There's 65 pages of all of these. This is one of those challenges whenever we get into these things of finding exactly where they all are. And some of you have said, by the way, I want this in a printed form because it's $15 for the PDF. Well, I have a book form now. So for another extra $15, because this is full color, it costs a lot to print these, but I really I really do that at cost. So at least it's not incredibly expensive to get a printed copy of these. A really nice, perfect bound printed copy, something you can keep and use for reference later on. Something always to look at. You can find out more about this at professormesser.com/NPCN, Network Plus Course Notes, where I've got the $15 PDF version or the I think it's $32 because it's so long. There's an extra $17 just to print it. But if some people, Mrs. Professor Messer says, I got to have a printed book. It's really the reason I did these. She says, people like printed books. They can carry it with them. They can open it up at any time. Plus, if you get the printed book, you get the PDF for free. So I just throw that in. So you get both. It's the best of both worlds. Have a look at that. And by the way, I know I mentioned this in the study groups, and you have to sit through me talking about these course notes, but this is what keeps the lights on, and I appreciate everybody who is supporting what we're doing here, creating these videos, putting this free training out for people to get a job and get a better job. Every dollar of this goes back to keeping this going, so thank you so much for your support. You can learn more about the course notes, professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's do another question. For those of you saying, please stop talking about course notes, let's do another question. I agree. Here's your next question. Which wireless standard uses 5 gigahertz frequencies at a maximum theoretical throughput of 54 megabits per second? Weren't we just talking about using all of these crazy terms and putting them all together and they sound like nonsense? This is a perfect example. Which wireless standard does use 5 gigahertz frequencies at a maximum theoretical throughput of 54 megabits per second? The possible answers are 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, 802.11n, 802.11ac. I didn't even give you an option here for anything else. I put down every single modern 802.11 standard. So you're going to have to know this one. You're going to have to know this one cold at being able to know what these are. And CompTIA expects you to know these cold too. So don't think that they're not trying to help you understand what these happen to be, because they absolutely are. One challenge with knowing all of these is knowing what they're really expecting you to know on this exam. Chat room's telling me that they're tricky. These questions are tricky. Yes, they are. They're intended to be. In fact, they're intended to hopefully get you thinking about the topics, because I'm not giving you a single, here's what 802.11 is. I'm really asking you about how it's used. And this is one you should definitely know how it is used. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer this one. Do I have a mnemonic for memorizing these standards? I really don't. The wireless standards they've changed the standards themselves. They switch themselves around through the years. They don't really follow a path. Maybe somebody else does. Maybe some of you have some good tips on how to do that. Let's see how folks have done so far at answering this one. How did we do? Well, let's see. 47% said 802.11a. And then it kind of a tie for second, a four-way tie for second. How about that one? 802.11n, 802.11g, 802.11b, and 802.11ac are all around 14, 13, 12, and 11% each. So that's one where 50% of you, half of you have said, we think it's 802.11a. Do we even see much 802.11a? I guess it's still around. You still see it out there. It's still available. It is one of the original wireless standards. It came around October of 1999. We started rolling out A pretty quickly. We had the choice when they released the standards, there was two you could choose from. You could either choose 802.11a or 802.11b. Two very different standards, but they came out at exactly the same time in October of 1999. 802.11a ran at 5 gigahertz ranges. Worked very well over a large area. We put these in a lot of warehouses. We would put the access points at the top of the warehouse, and you could cover everything. Haven't given you the answer yet. People in the chat room going, what was the answer? Haven't talked about it yet. We're just talking about standards right now. It runs at 54 megabits per second, which was another advantage of 802.11a over B, is that 802.11a ran at a blindingly fast 54 megabits per second, which, trust me, at the time, October 1999, we were really just kind of putting gigabit networks out. Most everybody running at 100 megabits wired. I could get 54 megabits really fast for the time. We thought that's the way to go, especially when you consider 802.11b relatively slower. It was a different set of frequencies and a different set of speeds, and that's why we didn't go with that. It had a little bit smaller range. That higher frequency, we had to figure out. We had to realize, wait, 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, they seem like the numbers are pretty close, but in reality, with the physics involved with the smaller frequency of 5 gigahertz, that frequency, the higher frequency, had a smaller, the actual signal was tinier, and it bounced around a bit and got absorbed by other devices much easier. So we really found that 802.11b would bounce a lot better than A would. A would get absorbed, so it didn't tend to work well in an office where everything was so tight. It would get absorbed by the walls. But in a warehouse, 802.11a worked great. And of course, it just depends on your scenario. That's one of the challenges when you're engineering wireless, is that there are so many different variables. Every configuration is different. Where you put the access point is very important. We really don't see A being used very much these days. We still, of course, see 5 gigahertz being used quite a bit. For example, the 802.11ac is 5 gigahertz. And same scenario. People asking, well, does AC uses 5 gigahertz? Does it get absorbed? Yes, it does. Physics doesn't change. The fact that we're using those frequencies doesn't change. So it's one of those that does come in handy. Here's a quick reference from my videos. You can see 802.11a is 5 gigahertz, 54 megabits per second. As I mentioned, 802.11b came out at the same time, 2.4 gigahertz, maximum throughput of 11 megabits per second. But turned out that was the most popular one we started to use for wireless because it works so well in almost any environment. So it would bounce around, just a little bit more forgiving when you worked in those types of environments. These days, 802.11ac, the latest standard, 5 gigahertz only, does not run at 2.4 gigahertz, but it runs really fast. Really, really, really fast. And so our question, when we're talking about which wireless standard uses 5 gigahertz frequencies at a maximum theoretical throughput of 54 megabits per second, well, we look at our chart, what we just talked about, absolutely 802.11a, the 52% of you did get that one absolutely right. Questions, notice in my charts, I don't put distances in here. I used to do that. It just confused everything because the distance, there's never a distance. There's never a standard distance for the wireless standard. It depends on what antenna you're using to transmit. It depends on what antenna you're using to receive. It depends on what's in the middle. Are you outside? Are you in a warehouse? Are you in a conference room? There are no distances for wireless that you could say, oh, 802.11a goes this far and 802.11b goes this far. You can't do that. There is no way to measure those things. So you don't see me measuring that. You won't be asked that on the exam because there's no way to ask that on the exam. So those of you that answered A, 802.11a, got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's keep this party going. Got another question for you. I should probably show you the big one first. Which of the following would be the best example of circuit switching? Which of these would be the best example of circuit switching? So, which one would it be? Would it be A, DSL, B, ISDN, C, SONET, D, MPLS, or E, 802.11 wireless? Which of the following would be the best example of circuit switching? Oh, for those of you asking in the chat room about the course notes, I have course notes for all of the exams. So if you're taking the NTIN 006, get the NTIN 006 course notes. If you're taking Security Plus, you've got an option right now. If you're taking the 401 exam, get the 401 course notes. If you're taking the 501 exam, get the 501 course notes. It just depends on the exam. Make sure you know what exam you're planning to take. That's kind of what I'm saying. For Network Plus, we got it easy. There's only one exam right now, the NTIN 006. Makes it easy. It's just a little hit. In fact, all of your study materials should match the version of the exam you're going to take. But back to this question, circuit switching. What in the world am I talking about? Well, that's sort of this question, isn't it? You do have to know what circuit switching is and what the alternatives are to circuit switching, which are also on the exam. These are all from the exam objectives. So make sure that you know what circuit switching is. Make sure you know what the alternatives to circuit switching are, and make sure you know which one of these goes where. So that's one of those, and being able to work through them. Maybe that's one whenever you're working through all of the different scenarios of what things would be. You can go through this. And in the chat room, people are mentioning, hey, you have to really read through these questions. Some of the questions are very detailed and expect you to remember and talk about a lot of these. So make sure you know what these are. Let's see how we did with this one. Which of these would be the best example of circuit switching? Move it down here so you can read it. How did we do? Well, we're a little torn. We've got 48% have said ISDN, kind of a tie for second with DSL, SONET, and MPLS, and 0% said 802.11 wireless. What in the world? How could nobody have chosen that answer? Probably because you're smarter than that. Let's talk about circuit switching. Circuit switching. We're literally switching you from one track to another with circuit switching. This is one where you're setting up a connection. You're setting up a circuit. You can even think of circuit switching as the old-timey operators, which had all the plugs. And they're setting up the circuit, clunk. Now the circuit is set up. Like you're making an old-style phone call. Really, a new-style phone call works very similar once it gets to the POTS lines, the plain old telephone system. A phone call, by the way, for those of you watching, are when you would pick up your device, you type in a series of numbers, and another device on the other end that correlates to those numbers will make a noise, and they pick it up, and you talk over voice to each other. I know, craziest thing. But people, they still do it. I've seen people doing this. For some reason, they've got text. It's in the device. They can send an SMS. I don't know why they don't. But that's what circuit switching is. You're kind of setting up this circuit, and then when you're done, you break the circuit down. That's effectively what circuit switching is, which means you can call someone, you can set up a circuit, you can get that connection going between point A and point B, but what if you don't say anything? You've been on those phone calls, right? So you just sit there. You're using a circuit that nobody else can use right now. It's up and running. It's connecting you to each other, but nobody else can use that. You're sucking up those resources. Only until you disconnect that circuit, hang up the phone, or disconnect the line, can someone now take advantage of that particular capability? So it's one of those that's just always on. Nobody else can use it while you're using it. What's good about it, though, you get guaranteed capacity. When you make that phone call and you're connected, when you set up that circuit and you're connected, you know exactly what the connection is going to be between point A and point B. Maybe if you don't, I'm just going to send information when I want. I'm paying for it, so I'm going to use it. We're going to set up the circuit, and I'm only going to send what I'd like to. A good example of circuit switching, I've already mentioned, the plain old telephone system, POTS. Some people refer to this as PSTN, Public Switch Telephone Network. Another type of circuit would be the old style wide area network circuits, T1, T3, or elsewhere in the world, E1, E3. Those are certainly circuit switched networks that have to be built out. The telephone companies have to run the wires all the way through their networks and then connect you at the end, and those lines are always there connected that way. You can see why they don't really implement these much anymore. What a waste of resources. ISDN is another good example. ISDN uses phone numbers to connect the two lines up. You still see ISDN used quite a bit, though, especially with radio voice communication. A lot of the radio stations will use ISDN. Especially, you may think that you're listening to somebody who is live in a studio. But the reality is these days, talk radio, for example, a lot of the talk radio hosts are at home or they're at their own studio like this. So this would be a very common talk radio studio. There's no radio station here. There's no antenna in the back. We're not broadcasting anything, but I might have an ISDN connection here that connects to an ISDN connection at the radio station. And because it's 128 kilobits per second maximum over these very basic rate ISDN, I can get some nice stereo sound. And these days, of course, we're doing this with Skype. Get some nice stereo sound. So that's a good example of circuit switching. If we look at our possible answers, which of the following would be the best example of circuit switching? It would not be DSL. DSL is a packet switched network. Sonnet is packet switched. MPLS is packet switched. And 802.11 wireless is packet switched, where we simply send an IP packet in. It finds its way through the network. We don't have to set up a circuit. We don't have to then use that circuit until we break it down. We simply throw a packet onto the network and somehow it finds its way to the other side. How does that work? It's the magic of networking. The only example of circuit switching in this list is indeed ISDN. B. If you answered B, the 51% of you that answered ISDN got that one absolutely right. And thank you in the chat room, the person who picked 802.11 wireless. It did look a little lonely down there. We got 1% on that one. Way to take one there. And just say, yes, we're gonna do that for those pieces. Network Plus exam, there's tons of content that you have to pour through and understand for the Network Plus exam. And maybe if you've ever worked with some of these Network Plus exams and trying to set up a VPN or trying to understand how to configure the networking piece in Windows or even working through any of those, it becomes very, very challenging. There are a set of labs that GTS Learning has created that will allow you to step through and understand how to do some of these topics. For example, I've got their labs up right now. I can configure VPN servers. I can understand how IPsec works. I can work through network load balancing. There's a SNMP, cryptography, domains and work groups. It's all in here. So these labs are set up so that you can work through these cryptographic scenarios. In fact, this one has a lab with a bunch of devices on it, 3 that I'll be connecting to. That's a Windows Server 2008 and a Windows 7 domain workstation to perform their lab for understanding cryptography. And they'll just have a step-by-step of exactly what you can do to do this. And all of these are virtual machines. I'm just going to power them all on right now. There's 6 machines. I'm going to power up, boom, 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 6 devices and get them running on there. These live labs are remarkable. Now, what's nice about GTS Learning has their own Network Plus book. When you get the labs, you get the Network Plus book with it too, plus all their practice questions for Network Plus. This all runs in your browser, by the way. It doesn't require any extra software. You don't have to do anything but open a browser up and go to the website. And it's a special price if you follow my link. If you go to the GTS Learning site, it's $169. If you follow my link, $109 for a year's access to these net labs. And once you're there, I think I've got some of these running already, there's the remote connection. So I can click on any of these. Look how fast this runs. I just choose whatever I want. I don't even know what I'm logging as root. What's the password? I don't know. I'm not following the directions. That's another good example. This is not on Rails. These are actual virtual machines that you can move around and do whatever you'd like on. If you wanted to do something completely unrelated, let's go to the pictures folder and let's delete all the pictures. I mean, you can do these things. And when you're finished, you just reset it. It goes back to the way it was. That's the beauty of these virtual labs. Maybe that's something you can appreciate and be able to use for your studies. That's something that might help you. Find out more at professormesser.com/netlabs to get the special pricing. That's something that I like to use as well. A lot of the screenshots from my Network Plus courses, I use this to do it because it's just a big playground. You can do whatever you like in there, or you can follow the labs that are set up. So plenty of capabilities and a lot of things to work with. Have a look at what they're offering. The good folks at GTS Learning, I work with them all the time. Great people to work with as well. Find out more about that, professormesser.com/netlabs. Do another question. Got one here for you. The question about VLANs. And the question specifically asks, if I go to change it on your screen, which of the following would be the best way to connect two switches where both are configured with a group of similar VLANs? Maybe you would. Maybe you would know how to do that. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA where you will see a series of options. And those options are, would you A, define an IPsec tunnel? Would you B, enable spanning tree? Would you C, enable LACP? Would you D, configure an 802.1q link? Would you E, turn on split horizon? Which of those would be the right answer? Which of the following would be the best way to connect two switches where both are configured with a group of similar VLANs? Maybe you know this one and working through those. That's a good one. If you think you know, go to professormesser.com/QA and answer it. I'm going to have a look and see how you're doing with these and get these here. By the way, if you are someone who is watching this, you've already gotten your Network Plus certification, you have an A+ certification, you already have a certification, and you're gathering continuing education units. This is good for 1 hour of webinar units. How about that? All you have to do is follow these instructions. You have to follow these instructions to get the CEU. At the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website is a Contact Us link. Click on that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address, make sure those are right because I will be emailing this back to you, and tell me that you watched the November 2017 Network Plus study group, and the special code word of the month was VLANs. You have to have all of that in there and then send it to me. And then at some point this week, I will sit down and go through these and send you back an email that has been digitally signed by me that gives you 1 hour of webinar categoried continuing education units. And you can use that for your CompTIA renewal. People use these CEUs for everything. You can use it for other renewals as well. So it might be something useful to go through. Let's see how we did with the answer here. Now we're back to our question where we have two switches. They've got similar VLANs configured on both of these switches. How do we connect these together? What in the world would we do to make this work? Maybe you know how this would work on these different pieces of these. Let's see how we did. We can see that 44% said configure an 802.1q link. 25% said enable spanning tree. 18% said to define an IPsec tunnel. 8% said enable LACP. And 5% said to turn on split horizon. So what would it be to have those there? What would be the correct answer for those pieces? Well, what we want to do, if we have two switches and we're trying to connect them together, we're effectively trying to trunk them. That's what that is. When we send multiple VLANs between switches, we want to create a trunk. That's what the term is in our industry. And we put these VLANs, we tunnel them inside the trunk. That's one of the things that we use. Now, the protocol that's used to keep track of these trunked VLANs is a protocol called 802.1q. Sometimes out here on the street, we call it .1q. Because why would you want to go through the process of saying, let's set up an 802.1q trunk? It's much cooler to say, hey, we got a .1q trunk there. There's a .1q. This is a very common configuration between switches. You will be configuring, if you are into switch configuration, switch management, you're going to be configuring a lot of trunks, a lot of .1q trunks. There's also an idea of this default VLAN that goes between the devices. So you have a default VLAN that's not trunked, and then every other VLAN is trunked. So this is a very common thing. It becomes normal after a while to have these here. The picture of this looks like this. You've got switch number 1 on the top, switch number 2 on the bottom. Each switch has 2 VLANs on it, a VLAN 100 and a VLAN 200, because down here you can see also VLAN 100, VLAN 200. So how do you connect them together? One of the things you could do is that you could put one link between the switches that VLAN 100 would use. You could put another link between the switches that VLAN 200 would use. What if you had 10 VLANs between the switches? This is where it gets crazy. You don't want to put 10 different connections that are used for each individual VLAN. That's the beauty of a trunk. You put one single connection between the devices, and you say, if these need to talk to each other, just send it across. I'll encapsulate it, figure out where it's supposed to go when it gets to the other side. That's the beauty of a trunk. And that's the one you're going to want to do. If you think about connecting 2 switches where both are configured with a group of similar VLANs, it must be D, configure an 802.1q length. 45% of you got that one absolutely right. That's close to the 50% that I shoot for to have this here. There is also 26% of you said to enable spanning tree. Now, as we mentioned before, spanning tree is used to prevent loops between switches and between devices on the same switch, but it's not a way to connect 2 switches so that the VLANs will communicate to each other. Simply enabling spanning tree doesn't actually connect the switches together. It doesn't do anything but prevent a loop, and that doesn't help with VLANs. We've got 16% that said define an IPsec tunnel. Well, you certainly could define an IPsec tunnel. Usually switches don't have a way to define an IPsec tunnel between switches. Usually routers and firewalls, sometimes some routers do, usually firewalls are able to do IPsec. And obviously if you have a dedicated IPsec VPN concentrator, it certainly would be able to configure an IPsec tunnel, but that's not commonly what you configure between switches. Very unusual to have an IPsec tunnel between switches, in fact. 7% said to enable LACP, the Link Aggregation Control Protocol. Now, if you had switches and you wanted to create multiple links between those switches and use them as one big, massive aggregated link so that you have a lot of bandwidth that you can use between these switches, you would be configuring you might be configuring LACP. You would be doing some type of link aggregation between the devices, and you have the option at that point to enable or disable or not use LACP. But LACP often is one associated with a link aggregation configuration. It is completely optional as well, and it would never be used to connect 2 switches when you're trying to put a group of VLANs together. That's not the best answer for here. And then 5% said to turn on Split Horizon. Split Horizon is a routing protocol option not used with switches. We would use it if we were connecting routers together, but we would not be connecting it to turn on to have a couple switches connected to each other. So unfortunately, that would not be the right answer either. We do have the right answer in D, configure an 802.1 link. And as I mentioned, if you're someone who's going to be working with switches, you're going to be configuring a lot of 802.1q links. And this is something you just always need to be aware of. Now, where did I get all these questions from? They came directly from the CompTIA Network Plus exam objectives. When I sit down and I create these questions every month, I go through the exam objectives, I find a topic, and I write a question about it. So if you yourself are studying for the Network Plus exam, and people ask me this all the time, how do I know when I'm ready to take the exam? That means you've got to download these exam objectives. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives, or you can go to Google, just type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you right to the page. This is where you should have gotten these first day when you started studying, but it's not too late. Get them and download them now. You should be using them as your checklist. If you can check off everything in this, you will take your exam and you will pass. That's how comprehensive these exam objectives are. This is the ultimate test of, do you know what you're talking about? So make sure you have these exam objectives. People ask me, I'm ready to take the exam. I got a day left. What do I do? I ask, how much of the exam objectives have you checked off? And they say, what exam objectives? I say, you are not ready to take your exam. You need to push that back. Make sure you get the exam. I can't say this enough. Make sure you get the exam objectives. Can you believe we've gone through an hour of questions? But I have another set of questions all ready for you in December. We do one of these every month. And again, next month, we've got a study group already set up and ready to go. December the 13th, we'll be doing the Network Plus study group. If you can find out, of course, if you're watching this on a replay and you're thinking, we're way past December 13th, you can always find out when the next event is going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. I'll tell you exactly when they're going to be there. I always keep that updated. You can link it to your Google Calendar. There's plenty of things in there. Stick around for the next hour, by the way. I've got your questions. You can ask me about anything for questions to be able to have this here. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Make sure you follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I will be eternally grateful if you were to do that. Thank you so much. Don't forget about my course notes, professormesser.com/NPCN. My thanks again to GTS Learning. Remember to get the special pricing and the book and the labs and the practice questions from them, professormesser.com/netlabs. And I do one of these every month. Check the calendar. Stick around for the next hour. We've got plenty to talk about. I'll be opening up the phone lines. You can ask questions in the chat room. It's open phone lines. You can ask questions about anything. And otherwise, we will see you next month on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone. Well, now, let's get these phone lines open. The phone lines. What do we do to make that happen again? Some of you watched the pre-show. I turned on my Skype because that's what I use to connect to this, and didn't work. It apparently had updated itself. So we're going to see how well this goes today, because we did finally get it working. So let's start a show. Let's host a show. I'm doing this on my side because I host the show. The show is actually in the cloud. So I'm hosting the show in the cloud. Let's start the show. And that way you're able to call in. There's the phone line if you wanted to call in. I have to call in myself. That's how this works. You're not calling me. You're calling the cloud. And then I'm calling the cloud. And it puts us together. And we're able to talk to each other. So let's see how this goes. Should ask me a question here.
Call in studio.
Oh, yes. And I need to type a thing in right down here. Here I'm typing this thing, and I'm hitting that.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I don't know my 6-digit PIN number because that sounds redundant. I need to change the 6-digit PIN number to something I can remember.
Welcome, host.
Welcome. I am here. I am logged in. So, by the way, this phone number, for those of you interested in calling in, 855-785-7545 is a toll-free number in the continental United States, but it is free to call from anywhere in the world over Skype, because there is a +1 you could put at the beginning of this on Skype, +1 855-785-RJ45. And that would be able to connect you as well. No Skype minutes required. Absolutely free. Can you believe it? Me either. Let's, in the chat room, somebody was asking, I need some coffee. Somebody was asking about my coffee cup, which is a Contigo coffee cup. They don't pay me for this, but I love this coffee cup. Why do I love this coffee cup? Because of that. Because because I got a little bit of stuff here. All this equipment. It's relatively expensive to replace. And so I keep all of my liquids in this little cylinder. It is awesome. And yes, in the background there is it's a white Rubik's Cube, because if you turn it on, it changes colors. It's a electronic Rubik's Cube. And that is not a CB radio. That is a amateur radio, a high frequency rig. Because I live in Florida, where we have hurricanes. And I have an amateur radio license so that I can communicate if I lose all other methods of communication. So that's the way to go. Yeah, I'm in 0G. That's how this Contigo. No, it's just Contigo is awesome. Let's go to the phones, though, because people are listening to me talk about coffee, and they could be talking to me about something completely different. So let's go to the 310 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, hi, my name is Sarah from Channel Islands Beach, California.
Nice.
And I have a question about, the Cert Master for test preparation. So I have all your stuff. I have gone through the purchasing process, but I'm just wondering about the Cert Master that they offer when you buy your actual test.
Right.
How many of those questions are actually on the test, and is that a good way, in addition to notes, etc., to study for the exam?
I wish I had a lot of information I could tell you about this, because I am not at all, I'm a little familiar with the Cert Master product. It's a product created by, or one that CompTIA has, they sell. I think they contract to have somebody make it for them. I don't believe, based on the feedback people have given me about Cert Master, which is this CompTIA product, they like the style of it. The questions are not questions from the exam. So CompTIA just doesn't give you questions that are from the exam. You don't have that choice. And the Cert Master questions apparently are not well vetted by CompTIA either, because I tend to get a lot of different readings from people when they tell me about going through the Cert Master. Some people really like it because it asks you questions and then it puts them back to you in a way that you can help learn the topics. But a lot of people have found that some of the questions are not exactly well edited, and they run into a scenario there. Your mileage may vary. I don't know when they update this software. I'm not familiar with how CompTIA works. I'm not a CompTIA partner, so I'm not at all familiar with what they do with those. That's why I say I have limited knowledge of CompTIA Cert Master itself. There probably are other people. I've seen people talk about it on Reddit. That probably would be a good place to pose that question, or at least search through the CompTIA subreddit and see if other people may have some feedback for you, because it's not one that I get a lot of people going, we definitely got to get that Cert Master, just because of the things they have seen. But maybe it works for you. I don't know. Not the best answer, I'm sure. Did we lose you, Sarah? I think we might have. But that's.
Oh, no, I just muted myself.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the answer.
That's sure. Hopefully that will work. And maybe if you do end up trying it, please let us know. That might help others know if that might be something useful that they can get for their studies as well. I'm so busy making my own content, I just don't have time to try everybody else's, I'm afraid.
Cool beans. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. I really do appreciate it. That's one of those where people ask all the time, what about this book? What about that thing? What about the others? I just have such limited time. I'm spending all of my time making my own content. Somebody said the other day, because I'm now putting out my latest Security Plus videos, and they said, who else has Security Plus videos? And I said, brother, I don't know. I am in this dark room putting together my own videos. I have no idea. They go, well, I'll let you know if somebody else is. I said, I don't care. I'm doing my own. I got my own videos. I don't need anybody else's, but I appreciate it. It was the thought, right? Of getting that there. Let's go to the 352 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Oh, hello. My name is Nick. I'm from Eustis, Florida, and I was just wondering, because my internet went out during your stream because I had a friend who was changing out the router in the classroom. Where do I go and look at all the questions that were done for the stream, or can I just find out right now?
There's no good way to kind of go through the questions that I do here. I don't technically archive them anywhere. Really, the replay is really the best way to do it. You've got the podcast you can go to where you can watch the video replay. And for those of you wondering, the video replay is available immediately after we're done here. It's automatically saving itself right now on YouTube. And as soon as I hit the stop button to stop streaming, it takes a minute or two for it to process it, and then it's available to watch on the replay. And fortunately, it's got big visuals, and YouTube does allow you to look at thumbnails. So if you did have to go back through and find those questions again, at least that's one way you could do it.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nick. That's one where I could see where that would be valuable. I might be using these questions myself, though, in the future. So That's another thing to think about. There may be a way. I'm working on that. There's a lot of things going on right now. We can talk about that with the 207 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yes, my name is RZ. I'm from Maine. I would like to thank you for your broadcast today.
You're welcome,
I was
sir.
doing my homework. Because we had no power in Maine for 1 week, and then I saw you're in live, so I just left my homework, so I'm watching you basically right now.
Fantastic. What are you working towards your Network Plus, or is there something else you're working towards?
No, I'm working towards my bachelor's degree in information security.
Okay. Outstanding. As someone who has been in the information security field, specifically with next generation firewalls, I definitely think that is a good place to get some knowledge right now. There is no slowdown right now in IT security. If anything, we need more and more and more security people. So you've picked a good one there.
Exactly. Even with the cybersecurity major, last semester they have like 65 students. This semester they have more than 150 students.
It's a very broad scope.
Program.
You can go so many places with that, whether it's firewalls and SIMs, whether it's configuring operating systems and hardening that, whether it's doing it on the computer science side and programming and making the applications more secure, or whether it's pen testing. Although that's a very small segment, it's still one that's very lucrative. So you got plenty of options. That's a good place to be.
Exactly. Even if I'm graduating next December, which is not this December 2018, my plan I want to join to the Air Force to be an officer up there.
Nice.
So my plans, I don't want to get any certification yet. Maybe after when I join the Air Force, they will pay for it and they will guide me which one I have to get.
Most certainly. And having some knowledge of the things that they do, there's extensive IT security certifications that they do. The CompTIA Security Plus is one of the entry-level certs you have to have in the federal market and the federal workforce. So it's one you'll certainly run into those eventually as well. And I will tell you, if you're interested in IT security, get as strong a foundation as you can in networking. Everything you're going to do in IT security builds on everything that's running across the network. So the better you are with networking, the better you're going to be in security.
That's what actually I'm doing. I'm doing minor in networking right now.
Perfect. That's a good one too, combo. Great, RZ. Good luck with your certifications. Thanks for calling, and let us know how it goes.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
That's one where in getting into the armed services, especially Air Force, a lot of Air Force folks send me emails all the time saying, here's what we're learning, a lot of networking, a lot of security. So I know you're in the right place with those. And my grandfather was in the Air Force, so I have a soft spot there. In fact, you can't see it. I have one of his old flight maps on my wall. I'm going to have to take a picture of that and show that. It's huge. It's an enormous flight map that's there. But I keep that here in the studio. You can't see it, but here it's right here along this wall, just about where the camera is, which is why you can't see it. So good decision and a good place to be with those. For those of you wondering and wanted to ask questions in the chat room, yes, I'm watching the chat room right now. Wishing the chat room was scrollable. The chat room is scrollable. It should scroll for you automatically for there, so that's useful there. Oh, yeah, there you go, figuring out those pieces. And if you have a question in the chat room, you're not interested in calling, you can simply put the question in there as well, and I'm able to see all of those going through and getting those pieces. Let's see, back to the phone lines. I will go to the 662 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Kirkland. I actually called last month, and I passed my Network Plus last week.
Awesome. How'd that experience go?
Apologies, I don't really have a question, but I wanted to thank you because it was your video series and your notes that pretty much single-handedly pushed me to be able to pass that.
That is great news. Now, for those of us that are on the phone listening and are planning to take their Network Plus, obviously you signed a non-disclosure agreement. You can't tell us a lot of detail about what you got on the exam, but overall, as far as preparation and experience, what are some things, do you have any words of wisdom that you could impart?
if you can and you have the ability to, try and look at real life scenarios where certain things are used. Like, I don't know. I work in networking now, but so I knew a little bit about firewalls and how those are configured. So I got more experience with that, and I felt more prepared with that.
Sure.
So packet tracer is a really good utility if you want to look at network traffic and stuff.
It is. That's one thing a lot of people don't really get into a lot because it's a bit outside the scope of Network Plus. But if you're ever trying to figure out, like, for example, I showed the live labs that are here, but if somebody wanted a very cost-effective way to build out virtually their own network, you have to have a little bit of Cisco knowledge, but there's a lot of places on the internet to get some of that. And you can build out your own routers and your switches. You connect them together. You can turn on spanning tree. You can configure an 802.1q trunk between devices. All of the things we talked about today, you can set up literally in just a number of minutes. The packet tracer is a Cisco product. Cisco primarily uses that for their training purposes, but it's something that used to be only available for people taking Cisco training. And last year, Cisco decided to make the license available for everybody. So it's free to use. Anybody can use it without any type of licensing worries. Just go out and Google Cisco packet tracer. It's a little bit of a learning curve to get started because it does require you have some Cisco knowledge. But if you're learning or trying to learn more on Network Plus and you've got the cycles, that's a great recommendation.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know you're doing an awesome job, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. It's very motivating. Congratulations on your Network Plus.
Thank you.
Take care. That's always good to hear, because whenever I'm thinking, do I need to build out that next Network Plus? Do we really need to work on the N10007? Of course we do. Absolutely we do. Kind of a win-win I've got going on with these scenarios too. So folks in the chat room, I see there's some calls coming in. We'll get to you in just a moment. In the chat room, folks are asking, if you're trying to get into the industry, you have no background experience in the field, what organizations can you join or attend locally that would help you? And this does come up from time to time, especially since it's hard to know where you even go with this. Now, interestingly enough, as someone who has been in networking and security for a very long time, working on primarily the vendor side, but also on the customer side as well, it's a pretty small group of folks. You tend to see the same people over and over. The geographical group of folks is pretty tight. So I say one of the best things you can do is get to know these folks. Go to, in fact, one of the best places you can go is to go to a user group meeting in your area. There's going to be a user group meeting in your area. Maybe some of these meetup.com is a great place to go. Usually people will put their meetups there. Go to a Microsoft, even though it's not networking, it's not security, go to a Microsoft user group meeting. I say Microsoft user group meeting because that there tends to be more of a chance to have one in your area than other types of user groups. But if there's a Cisco user group meeting in your area, go to that one. And a lot of manufacturers will have their own seminars and user groups as well. So if there is and when I worked at Palo Alto Networks did a lot of local user groups. And you get to meet the people that have that same technology. And they're more than happy to have you there. Learn more about that technology, understand some of the capabilities that are there, and you get to talk with the people who are already there, which, by the way, is the reason you're attending. And everybody at this meeting would love to meet everybody else as well. So one of the things I always made sure is that when people came to the meeting, I was introducing them to the other people that were there. Because the more contacts you can get, add them to your LinkedIn, eventually you're going to be walking in their door and looking for a job. And you're like, oh, yeah, I know you from the user group meeting. Or even if you're not interviewing with them, oh, I know somebody who works here. I know Bob. I met him at the user group meeting last month. That type of thing becomes important. People like to hire people they know. They much better to have a connection internally than not. So take advantage of that and know about what some of those people are doing. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's click on the phone lines. There we go. The 719 area code is the one I'm trying to click on. And apparently I'm incapable of doing so. There we go. It's making a circling noise. There's 719. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yeah, hi. My name is DJ. How you doing?
Hey, DJ. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I was wondering, and I do have a question. I did want to also thank you. I really appreciate that you put this stuff out there. I'm getting a lot from it. But my question specifically is, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the labs from GTS Learning. You started to go over them a little bit, and I was a little confused when I was on the website because I'm trying to pick the best thing for me to move forward with there, and it's a little confusing because if you get the self-study live labs, their website says you don't get the lab manual. So I'm wondering if you buy the self-study live labs, is it something you kind of guided through doing different scenarios, or is it really just a lab environment, you just go in there and do what you want sort of thing?
It's kind of a combination. The lab, there's different products that they offer, and I'm not part of GTS Learning. I don't know the details of what they're offering at any particular time, but I do know that they have a great book because I use their book to help create the videos that I ultimately come out with. And the live labs are a separate product to that. I know that occasionally they bundle these things together. And I thought at this point, if you get the live labs, I thought they bundled their book along with it at this point. I might be wrong about that point, but you can always contact GTS Learning directly to get more details about that. The live lab products are set up. I'll find a good example of this. I have it on my screen, so if you are somewhere near where you could watch, this would be a good place to do it. But they've got tons of labs here to work through. Let me go back to the lab guides. Labs that take you through step-by-step these different scenarios, understanding network protocols, email client protocols, Hyper-V, software as a service, VPN, network vulnerabilities, firewalls, et cetera, et cetera. So you can, of course, go into any one of these and go through step-by-step the labs that they've set up with screenshots and explanations, and they take you through the whole thing. But it is an open lab. It's a virtual machine. It's a full-blown Windows server or Windows workstation you're able to work through. So if you didn't want to follow their labs and you wanted to see if you could build out a VPN yourself, or you wanted to swap out the certificate for something else, or you wanted to change one of the parameters yourself, you've got complete control to do whatever you'd like. And if you mess something up, you hit a button and the entire thing is reset. So you can't go wrong. You can't break anything. You can just click a button, everything resets to where it was, and you can start the process over again. So you do have some flexibility with that. I love going in and just playing around with things sometimes because I don't have a Windows server set up in my studio. I just have never set one up. I don't need one very often, but when you need one, you really need one. So I open up the live labs. I start a lab that's got a server in it, and I go in and start playing around with the Windows server and getting that to run. And it's just something easy for me to do because it doesn't keep me on a rail. It's not a linear lab that requires you to click on a thing and move it before you can go to the next step. You've got complete control over that. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. So it's really up to your style of learning and how you like to go through those pieces.
Yeah, and that answers my question perfectly. It looks like you kind of get the best of both worlds there. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
That's when you do... It is nice to have the flexibility in my mind, because sometimes I'll go through a lab and wonder, what if I did it this way? And I'll go back and I'll change something. And did it break? Because the only time you really learn something is when it's broken. That's when you really learn. When it all works, I didn't learn anything from that. Let's break it and then see if we can get it to work. That's where I start learning something. My neck of the woods, the 850 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Caller. 850. Are you there, caller? North Florida. Are you checking in? I hear noises from Pensacola to Jacksonville. Are you there, caller? We'll have to come back to you.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. There you are. Welcome. Good morning. What can we do?
Good morning.
You have a question? What can we do for you? Dude, what a day, man. Just kind of starting out. Getting the day going. It's tough, man. All right. Well, you're welcome to call back. I'm sure we'll probably connect better next time. Now that the microphone is working, now that everything is there, now we've got those there. Back to the chat room. We can get questions from there as well. Folks are mentioning in the chat room, by the way, there are options for, if you have an EDU email address, you get a significant discount on your CompTIA exam Make sure you take advantage of that. It's the CompTIA Academic Store. So you can Google out, I think it's academic.comptiastore.com, but just Google the Academic CompTIA Store. And you'll get, it's like 50% off for your exam exam vouchers. So don't use these 10%. If you've already got an EDU email address, use that one because you get the biggest significant benefit from that. That's a great price, 50% off if you're a student. That's fantastic. Okay. Question in the chat room. What's the status on using VMware on a desktop? You loaded it a few weeks ago, and now it says the trial is over. What trial? I thought VMware was free to use on a desktop. There's obviously many different VMwares that you could be using for Windows, and there's different VMwares for different products completely. The VMware Player is the one that is free on VMware's site. But it's really, really, really hard to find where to download that. It's really hard to figure out where that is. But there is a free version. I think they're still giving away the free version. They used to hide it on their website. They would literally hide the VMware Player for Windows. And I don't know if they're still hiding it, if it's one where they've decided, we're not going to do it free anymore. I don't download the Windows version much anymore, so I haven't seen lately. Your other option, of course, is VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a product from the folks at the database company. Why can I not remember anything today? Oracle VirtualBox. And that's one that is free. You can download that and run virtual machines from there as well. For those of you trying to get your own virtual machines up and running, you need some Windows VMs, go to modern.ie. Modern.ie. It will redirect you to a Microsoft website that has developer information on it, and there's a tools menu there that has virtual machines for Windows ready to go for Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. So it's all set, ready there. And yeah, you can set up full networks on VirtualBox. I like VirtualBox. I used it almost exclusively. It had a few bugs on the Mac side for a while there, and I had switched over to VMware, but I tend to switch back and forth between them depending on what I'm doing. A lot of places already have VirtualBox downloads ready to go. This site, for instance, on Microsoft, once you choose a VM you want, they have VirtualBox, Vagrant, Hyper-V, VPC, VMware, and Parallels. So they've got a lot of options there. I've tried Parallels on the Mac as well. That's a very once you finish and go through the trial, like every time you start it for the trial, they're kicking you to buy the version. It's so much easier to do a VirtualBox because it's free and it works. And you could set up your Windows configurations. Now, when you say, can you set up full networks on VirtualBox? There is the option within a lot of these virtual systems to be able to set up a virtual network. So you can have a virtual router and multiple virtual switches, and you can configure settings on all of those. That is not something available on VirtualBox. In fact, it's not something available in the base of most of these client virtualization packages. You would have to buy a commercial package. Even the VMware for Mac that I use, the Fusion, you'd have to get the Fusion Pro to be able to do that. So that's a more advanced capability that generally you don't get on the free products. But in the client version of these products, most of them allow you to set it up as NATed or bridged or an internal network. You have a lot of networking options. So I guess it really depends on what you're trying to do. You'll have to look very detailed at that. And maybe somebody's able to find out if VMware Player, if that's something that's still free. I see they say buy VMware Player today on their website. Is that something? Did they finally get rid of the VMware, the free VMware for Windows? That would be a shame, wouldn't it? I bet that's not the case. I bet there is a free version somewhere hidden on the VMware website. We'll have to see. May not be. That just may be how it goes with this version of software. You never know. VMware was doing a lot of things with development of the product and who was able to use it. It wouldn't surprise me if they changed the licensing of it as well. Just, you got to keep up with those things. And I have not. Let's go to 540 area code. Caller, are you there? What's your name?
Hi, Professor. This is Zoe.
Hey, Zoe. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Talking about virtual machines, brought up a question that I've been having with my laptop. It came pre-installed with Windows 10 Home, not Professional, and I really don't feel like paying for another version of a Microsoft operating system. I was wondering if there was a way to install like kind of the base laptop once I reset it in the virtual machine, like get it to run that version from within the virtual machine, or is that not possible?
It is possible. It's not extremely straightforward to do this, but it depends on the software you're using as your virtual platform. For example, I have had laptops running Windows that I've used, but then I shifted over and I bought a Mac platform to do all my video editing and create my courses and everything. But I really liked having that Windows available, but I didn't want to have to lug the laptop around. A lot of these virtual machine client software packages have an import program that can connect to that device, that Windows device or that other operating system, and can import it as a virtual machine. And so it can effectively make that physical machine and turn it into a virtual machine that you can then run on whatever the operating system is that you finally decide to use. So you could load Linux and boot up your Windows instance inside your Linux desktop for the Windows apps that you use, and then you can close it down when you're finished using it. Most of the software platforms or the software packages like VirtualBox, VMware, and some of the others, they have how-tos on how to do that. And it's not incredibly straightforward, but at least they have programs that can go out and do a lot of this automated. And I've used their automated functions a lot. It's worked great because I've had these. I have these crazy things. I have these appliances that are running Windows, and I don't want to have to drag the appliance around. So I virtualize it, and it works great.
So I want to make sure I understand, because I know that there's usage, or, you buy a license, and with Microsoft, it's per device, not per user. But what I want to get away from is actually booting a device into the operating system and just run everything in a virtual machine. So I don't see that I'm using it, twice. I just need to, are you saying I would need to install a different operating system on the laptop, or I would just be able to boot it up? I have VirtualBox installed and then import the base operating system into that VirtualBox.
Well, there are some things in life that you can't avoid. There's death, there's taxes, and there's Microsoft licensing. Whenever you virtualize Microsoft Windows, there's a license required to run that. So if I was to take a laptop running Windows and create a virtual version of it, I've either got to get rid of the laptop, no longer use that anymore, or I'm going to have to pay for another license of Windows to be able to make that happen. Plus, when you do that virtualization, Microsoft's own licensing inside of Windows may say, hold on a second, this is not our old laptop. You need to fix the licensing here. You either need to buy a new license or you need to transfer the license over. And that even may require that you contact Microsoft to do that. But yeah, you can't avoid some of the licensing challenges.
Okay, so it's either buy another license for Windows or run Windows on the laptop and use the VirtualBox for everything else.
That's the option. You can virtualize anything. You just can't run from the licensing, folks.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that question.
Absolutely. Good luck, Zoe.
And
you're welcome to call back. So quick. I was just turning that off. So sorry. That's one of those. Like, wait. Already hung up the phone. So sorry. That's one where you do get into this scenario, though, that Windows is so particular about licensing. So whenever you start virtualizing operating systems, it's easy when it's Linux. You don't have to worry about the licensing. But as soon as you start virtualizing Windows, the Windows licensing is so particular, and they keep changing it. they'll come out with a new update that now is looking at different things. So it's a little bit of a challenge. Once you virtualize it, though, and everything's licensed properly, it runs like a champ. I mentioned that that Microsoft site at modern.ie that's got all the virtual machines on it. Those are ready to go. Those are already, they're licensed. I think they're good for 90 days. So after 90 days, they expire. Now, you can't use these for any production use. You can't use them to do your word processing, your spreadsheets, to use as a desktop. These are development systems and testing systems, but they're great for studying for your exam. So that might be something as well. Let's see if we can go back to the 850 area code. Caller, are you there? What's your name?
My name is Gabriel Collins from Panama City, Florida.
Oh, welcome, Gabriel. What can I do for you?
I'm just calling to say my computer class is a huge fan of yours, and basically our whole curriculum is based off your notes. But the point is, right now we're doing a lesson, I think, in like the CMOS battery, and someone's having an issue with it. Could you give us like a clear definition of it one more time for us?
Is there something in particular that's causing the biggest problem when you're dealing with the battery?
I don't think so. He was taking apart a computer, and we were just looking into it. We were just curious what was happening.
Yeah, I think part of the challenges with that is that the battery and how we use a battery in a motherboard has changed over time. It used to be back in the day when there was no flash memory, there were no USB sticks. We had a little bit of memory set on the motherboard so that if we configure settings in the BIOS, it would save them to this memory, but it wasn't flash memory. So if you unplugged the laptop, or the computer, wasn't even a laptop at that time, you unplugged the computer from power, it would lose all of those settings. So the motherboards had the little tiny battery on them. And so it didn't matter if you unplugged the computer, it would still remember your BIOS configurations because it had this battery to keep the settings for that memory. Well, of course, as time went on, flash memory became available, was something that became normal. We had our USB keys, and we put flash memory on the motherboard. And if you were to store something in the BIOS configuration, it didn't require a battery to save that anymore. It just stored it on the flash memory that's on the motherboard. But you'll notice the motherboard still has a battery on it. Well, that's because there is a real-time clock on the motherboard. And if you want the clock to stay up to date with the correct date and time, you still need to have that battery there. Here's where the challenge comes, is that a lot of people remember back in the day, if somebody set up a password for their BIOS, and if they wanted to clear the password, they would just remove the battery and the BIOS configuration was erased. They put the battery back in, they boot up, the password was gone. Well, now that we're storing things in flash, you can't do that anymore. You remove the battery, you boot up the machine, hey, the BIOS configuration is still there. Of course it's there. It's stored in flash memory. So these days on most motherboards, there is usually a separate process you go through to clear passwords. Every motherboard's different. Sometimes it's setting a flash, sometimes it's setting a jumper, sometimes it's changing a switch, sometimes you have to do it with software. It just depends on the motherboard, the platform, and the manufacturer. The actual doing that to clear things like passwords well beyond the scope of anything I'll work with, because you're now circumventing the security of a system, and I don't want to get into anything like that. If you're having a problem getting into a system because of a BIOS password, you should call the manufacturer directly, and they will walk through the process of confirming that the device belongs to you and then give you the options to be able to make that happen, if that's something you're not able to Google easily. But it's something I don't want to get into on my side. For obvious reasons. I don't know if somebody comes to me if legitimately that's their computer that they're trying to clear the password, or it's not legitimately their computer that they're trying to clear the password. So that's the real challenge with these, is being able to make that happen. And I think whenever I start working through these and trying to figure out, what do I do with this? How do I make that happen? How do I clear the machine? You're just going to have to do some research and figure out those pieces. I think that's the easiest way to do it. So that's what I would recommend anyway. You just never know. And in the chat room, people are going, yeah, it's jumpers. Most of the time, it usually is some jumpers. You have to know which ones it is, and you have to have a jumper somewhere to put on it. But that is a very common way to do it. I think so. That's what I run into. And I like to figure those pieces out and know before I start getting into the details. What's it going to take here? Because you want to be careful what you're jumping. You don't want to delete things that maybe you don't want to have deleted. Some of these jumpers will clear the BIOS completely. That's may not what you want to do either. You want to clear the BIOS configuration, not the BIOS software itself. That'd be something to do. Wouldn't that be bad if you put a jumper on, you cleared out everything on your computer, and then you had a problem? A lot of the newer motherboards, especially the gaming systems, have dual BIOS. So if you mess this BIOS software up, you can flip a switch and go to the other one. I like having that. That way, if I'm doing a BIOS upgrade, I can perform a BIOS upgrade on one side of the BIOS, not one side, but one separate BIOS on the A BIOS, and I can upgrade the A BIOS and then flip over and upgrade the B. Comes in handy to be able to have that there too. That's one wherever I start messing around with my computer, I'm very particular about doing a BIOS upgrade, and you absolutely should be as well. It's just something to think about. We're still taking phone calls. I got a little more time left. We can go through this. Whenever I start going through the details of this, it also helps to know where to get the documentation for those motherboards. I always like to find not the manufacturer's documentation. Sometimes you can find the documentation set up for the technicians. That's the one you're looking for whenever you work through those. So that may be something you can do as well. Well, there is a lot more happening these days for those of you that are keeping track of what we're doing here at Messer Studios. We are in the middle of the Security Plus exam objectives, walking through the objectives. If you look at the YouTube right now, there's all Security Plus. So I've got a bunch in the can right now that are ready to be edited. Every day, it seems, I'm sitting right here and shooting more of those. So if you're somebody who's working towards the Security Plus, there will be more and more Security Plus 501 videos coming out all the time over the next month or two. And then we're shifting gears because the new Network Plus, since we're the Network Plus study group, the new N10 007 will be out probably March timeframe, I would think. So there will be new content coming out there to be able to work through those. So keep working through those and knowing that those are there. Whenever I start trying to figure out where I go with this, that's really what you should go with. If you're working on the N10 006 right now, go with that. Folks in the chat room are asking, wondering if you can talk about the video resources available. My YouTube videos, are there others? No, everything I create, everything I do for my training videos, every minute of every video is on YouTube. Now, I keep an index on my website. So if you go to professormesser.com and you choose the course that you're interested in, I've got a huge page there that all the indexes are there. So you can either go to my website and I just simply embed the YouTube videos, or if you're just somebody on YouTube, you can go out to YouTube. I have playlists there as well that also take you through all the videos. If you're on my site, you also get a transcript. So as I'm building these, the transcripts are there with everything that you might want to go through. The transcripts are useful too, especially if maybe English is not your first language. Then you can at least read through. I get human beings to write these transcripts, so they're not an automatically generated transcript. So that's there too, to have those pieces there. I don't have any plans to create videos that you would not have access to in other ways. I don't know if they will always be on YouTube in perpetuity. I don't know if that YouTube will be always where they are, but it's a pretty good platform right now. I personally have not been hit by a lot of the monetization problems that have happened on YouTube, probably because my content is very much non-controversial. I mean, it's training classes. So that part is good. I haven't been hit through those, and it's been a pretty good place to have the videos. So make sure that you have a look at those, and if it ever moves from YouTube, you will know. You can come to my website and I'll always point to them, but my goal is to always have them publicly available. They will never be behind a paywall, I hope, ever. I never want to do something like this. This model has worked very well. So financially, the lights are still on, people are able to eat, kids still have clothing. Those things are working. So I wouldn't be able to do it without your support. You're supporting the site through watching the videos, coming to my website and looking at the content there, buying the course notes and the MP3 files and the video files themselves. So thank you for that. That's really the best things you could do. And in return, I get to keep all of this stuff publicly available. So it's a perfect combination. Are the new course objectives for the N10007 out yet? Officially, no. Unofficially, can you find them? Let's find out. If you type very specific things into the Google machine, you can find, is it still there? There used to be one out there. I found one that somebody accidentally, I think, put out that they weren't supposed to. Because I think CompTIA has provided, I put the wrong thing in. I put the wrong course notes in. This is the N10007. If you put that into, yes, there is a copy of the N10007 exam objectives available if you were smart enough to know how to get to Google and find them. They have not been officially released by CompTIA. So they probably won't be out there forever. I suppose someone will take them down pronto. But somebody, I think, has accidentally made them publicly available out on the internet side. So you may be able to find the latest exam objectives. But again, that's not an exam that's coming around until March. There's not going to be a ton of study materials available. Certainly not a lot relative to the 006 in March. So I think a lot of people will continue to take the N10006 up until the time that it is retired, which will probably be September timeframe of next year. So yes, there's usually a 6-month overlap. So even if they come out with the 007 on March the 1st, CompTIA tends to have a 6-month overlap. Traditionally, that's what they've done. I don't know. That tends to be what they do. So really well into the end of near the end of 2018 to be able to take the 006. And what I found is that people will take that exam version up until the very last day it's offered. So it always surprises me that that's there. People like, because there's so much material available relative to the newer version. So I think they're smart. I think they're smart to take the exam where the most amount of information is available. And it's just brilliant that they do that. And the last day, everybody's sad. When they finally retire that version, then everybody has to transition over. Usually by that point, though, the people that are going to take the new one are already studying for the new one, and the people that are going to take the old one have already been studying for the old one. So it's not a big jarring difference. Everybody kind of migrates out perfectly. I think that 6-month ramp is just perfect the way they do it. Am I still Network Plus certified, or is it something else? I have my old Network Plus certification. That was the Good for Life one. I have intentionally not taken the newer exams because when you take a newer exam, you sign a non-disclosure agreement that you won't say anything about the exam. So by not signing the non-disclosure, I can say anything I want about the latest exam that I hear from someone else. So that's kind of sneaky on my part, but I already know the content. A lot of the certifications I have, though, are industry certifications like the Palo Alto Network certifications and some of the Cisco certifications, the things that I did in my career. I wasn't always doing videos on the internet. I was working as a systems engineer and designing out these security platforms. So a lot of what I did was get certifications in that specific area. So a lot of those are focused. Once you get to that point, you tend to slide into industry or company-specific certifications. And I was a systems engineer at Palo Alto Networks, so a lot of what I did was systems engineering certifications that were Palo Alto Networks focused, or anything that was focused on security at that level. I never did take a CISSP. That would probably be the next step for me if I was still doing that, or maybe perhaps some of the Cisco, so I could be more competitive with understanding the Cisco products and being able to compete against them. But I stopped working there, so I don't need those anymore. And I don't have a boss anymore, so I don't need to get a certification for that. Now my focus is, do I need to get a certification to know what you need to know to take the exams? And I think at this point, I started making the Network Plus exam series at the N10004. So we've made a 4 and a 5 and a 6. This will be our 4th edition of training. So, we've been doing this for well over 10 years now. So I think I've got a pretty good grasp on what's required to know for the Network Plus exam. So I don't plan on taking the exam again. I like having the freedom to say whatever I'd like with those pieces. Any tips for people interested in entry-level cybersecurity jobs? I do. There are not a lot of entry-level cybersecurity jobs. A lot of the jobs in security these days, and cybersecurity is an odd term because it's not really a thing. There's IT security, and there's kind of the computer science side of security, that type of thing. But for IT security, which focus on keeping data secure, understanding, managing, and configuring firewalls, intrusion prevention, URL filtering, IPsec VPNs, certificate authority management, in the cloud, virus and malware detection, those types of things. And I guess that does sort of apply towards the forensics and penetration testing, although I will tell people that when people are looking at security, for some reason, the industry has said, go get your penetration testing knowledge. The reality is, though, it's such a small segment of available jobs out there. So don't get trapped in this idea that everybody's going to go out and do penetration testing, because if everybody did that, there'd be no jobs at all for anybody. The vast majority of positions available in security are IT security jobs that focus on the daily operation and management of those security platforms that I just mentioned. But in either case, and I mentioned this earlier, get the best foundation in networking as you can. When you are setting up and configuring firewalls, when you're doing penetration testing, when you're looking at forensics, you need to know where the data is flowing. You need to understand the routing protocols that are taking place. You need to understand how the load balancing works and the protocols that are used for load balancing. You need to understand the proprietary nature of some of the active-active and active standby load balancing scenarios. And then you've got to layer on top of that the security aspects, understanding how to set up the proper rules in a firewall to be able to allow and prevent the things that you're trying to allow and prevent. You need to understand how that integrates with a SIM. There's probably a third-party authentication that's being used to gain access to the systems and the networks. There is IPsec configurations and client-side VPNs. Are you going to roll out certificates to be able to use for authentication with those? Is there going to be some type of access control so that you're doing host checking of those devices to make sure that they are secure enough to get onto your network? All of those things are security related, but as you can see, there's this kind of a networking and even an operating system subset to those, a foundation to those. So if you're planning any role in security, you're going to have a ton of operating system there, and you're going to have a ton of networking to go along with this. So as long as you can get a nice foundation that you can build on, you're going to do well with security. That's coming from somebody who managed, really designed, set up, implemented some very large scale next generation firewall implementations in some of the biggest companies in the world. So there is an opportunity, and I mentioned this very early on in the study group, it's broad. There's tons of things you can be doing in security. If you focus solely on setting up a world-class SIM to capture all of this data from all of these devices, and you were able to put it into some type of big data platform that you could use to find these security problems, you could do that your entire career. That single thing that really technically has nothing to do with firewall configurations, it has nothing to do with VPN setups, has nothing to do with certificate authorities, has nothing to do with any of those, but just that one thing could keep you in a job forever till you were tired of it, and then you could go to something else. But you could really do this with anything. My last position, I worked about 7 years at Palo Alto Networks as a senior systems engineer, and when I left, I started as one of the very first systems engineers there as we were growing from a startup. But even when I left, there were still things to learn. We were still adding on new functions, new capabilities. The market was changing, security was changing, and it continues to do so. So whatever you decide to go into, you will always be learning something, especially in IT security. This really applies to IT in general, but especially I found in IT security. I left there, and still there were things that I was learning and figuring out and trying to keep up with, because that's just the nature of technology. And I think you will find that as well. I think you will find that's exactly the way it's going to work for you. Well, we've come to the end of another Network Plus study group. I want to thank everybody for joining me on this one. We could not do these study groups without your help. Thank you for the questions and the people that called in today. Thank you for the questions in the chat room and the things happening. Of course, you can always contact me on my website. Click the top or the bottom. There's a contact us right there. Really, it's contact me. It comes directly to my inbox. I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to answer any questions you might have. We have another one of these planned next month. Make sure you come back in December for the big end of the year blowout on December the 13th is the next Network Plus study group. If you like these live events, we have another one next week at this time. That is our Security Plus study group. In any case, we just hope to see you back here. Thanks for joining us on this one. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group.